There are several ways that a realtor can represent a tenant in a real estate transaction. And I just want to quickly go over the forms that are involved with this. These are disclosure forms that we have to present customers when they're renting an apartment. And the first one here is called the Consumer Information Statement, which basically states how realtors represent people in a real estate transaction. And on this form, it references sellers or buyers, but those titles can be transferred to a seller, can be also a landlord, and buyer can also be translated as a tenant on the form. And it says here at the top. So we're just going to swap out seller for landlord and buyer for tenant for the purposes of this demonstration. But there's several different ways that a realtor can represent. One is as a landlord's agent representing the landlord. The other one is a tenant's agent representing the tenant, exclusively only the tenant. And then there's disclosed dual agency where the realtor represents both the landlord and the tenant. So that would be like whether like I as an agent have direct contact with the landlord and I also represent the tenant to rent that apartment, or my company has representation with the landlord and I have representation with the tenant. It's still a dual agency situation, even though I may not have direct contact with the landlord. We are only agents under our brokerage. So the brokerage represents both parties in that transaction, the landlord and the tenant. The other way that someone can represent is as a transaction broker, where a transaction broker does not really represent anyone. They don't have a fiduciary responsibility to either party. They're there just to facilitate the transaction. Personally, I do not act as a transaction broker. I either represent, if I'm representing a tenant, it would be as a tenant's agent or as a dual agent if the opportunity arises where my company also represents the landlord. So there's that form. And then if dual agency does come into play, where the apartment that the tenant is renting is also represented by the same brokerage company or agent at that brokerage, the tenant would have to acknowledge that and give consent to that dual agency, saying that they are aware that the company represents both parties and they consent to that. So that would also be acknowledged on this consent to dual agency form, which I will link both of these forms down below for your review. If you have any questions about representation and agency, feel free to contact me at walter@livingonthehudson.com or at 347-448-3766. Thank you.